to all you uncommon travelers out there, and thank you for joining us for Behind the Screens. You might be wondering, what exactly is a Behind the Screens? Well, aside from a dice tray, some DM notes, and a lot of improv and faith, Behind the Screens is actually our newest program and our newest show that we're going to be working on and posting rather consistently from here on out. But aside from homebrew tips and DM tips, there's also going to be a great backlog of ways to catch up on the actual sessions themselves, great recap videos, a lot of lore-based stuff, especially since, again, the campaign is based on a previous one that we ran off camera, but we'll talk about that later. The name Behind the Screens was actually inspired by one of the members of the party for a short time, our dear friend Sophia. So Sophia, if you're watching this, thank you again immensely for all the hard work you do for the show, not only for just inspiring us with great story ideas, project ideas, but the numerous amounts of amazing art that you provide for us. Sophia, thank you so much. We would not be able to do quite literally any of this without your support. Throughout the entirety of this campaign, there are going to be numerous different callbacks and references and cameos to certain characters and certain events or things that transpired in the other campaigns that maybe you guys won't pick up on, and I don't expect you to. You weren't there these past 3 years, but we want to make sure that you're still in the loop on the story, which is why we're going to have certain sessions of Behind the Screens dedicated to lore recaps, previous event recaps, various stuff that might have taken place, behind the scenes that you guys weren't really a part of until now. So one of the questions I've seen tossed about a little bit here or there is why exactly we're called Tea&D. I mean, obviously it's a play off of D&D, which is of course a game we play constantly, which you all know, but where does the tea element incorporate into things? I mean, most of the time we're either drinking Mountain Dew or an energy drink and probably not enough water, but where does this actual tea element come into play in things? The tea element of Tea&D was actually synonymous with my own self. It was always kind of linked hand in hand with myself being an avid tea connoisseur, and with each session that we play at my dinner table, we would always have a different type of tea that was brewed up for that corresponding session. I had actually gotten into D&D a few years back at this point. I had recently just lost my job and I didn't have the most funds at the time, so I was trying to figure out a great way to still keep in contact with my friends, hang out with them on a rather consistent basis, and not spend too much money. And the first two parts I got down pretty well. The third part, well, you can pretty much gather what you can with D&D. When we first started out, I'd like to think that maybe I had a better concrete idea of what the story was going to be, about and the direction it was going to be going in, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was rough. I made plenty of mistakes that I regret as a DM and as a friend, if I'm being really honest, and these are mistakes I think were easily avoidable, which is why I'm making a series dedicated to avoiding them. But despite the flaws with the initial design of the campaign, I really did have a great time with my friends during it, and word traveled relatively quick, and after a while, people started wanting to join us, and rather than me having a 12-person campaign, at least during one session, I decided to do something I thought would be rather creative. I made two different campaigns, two different rosters of characters to be specific, that took place in the same world at the exact same time, where one party's actions would influence the other, without them ever finding out. The best way I could describe this was the world's longest game of cat and mouse that spanned for 2 years, and the funniest part about it is we were all pretty good friends, and there was never a really moment that anyone had picked up on the fact that they had all been playing in the same world. Like, occasionally they'd reference a character in one campaign that was in another one, but I think for the most part they thought that was just my own lack of creativity using the same characters, and to be fair, it kind of was. But through thick and thin, and the entirety of these two campaigns spanning over a couple of years, that secret was maintained extremely well until the finale, when I decided it was about time to let everyone find out the truth and play at one combined, absolute, just pile of a table. We actually had to put two tables together in order to run the session, and I had to keep one party hidden in one room while the other party was actually doing the introduction to that quest line. It was actually a lot of fun. I'm actually going to put a clip of that right there.
What draws your attention immediately is the mark of manhood that goes down the other sides.
Hey! Hey, who are these guys?
What the fuck? So, that's like Christmas.
After the quote finale of things, I knew I still wanted to do stuff with Goldwharf with the plane that they were playing in, so I had a sort of rotating roster of players. Some decided to take a break from D&D, others decided to join, and it was a lot of fun, but part of me really felt like I was kind of limited creatively with that world, and I wanted to let my ideas out in a completely separate campaign. I would do a few one-shots here or there, nothing too concrete. I've never really been a fan of one-shots or like mini campaigns / adventures that much. I've really enjoyed like fleshing out a world and just going kind of autopilot mode, like just letting it run itself and seeing where the characters and players will take things. And with that being said, it's very difficult to really let myself be the most creative when I have two stories taking place in the same world, and I don't want to be repetitive or redundant. And that also means that players from one campaign will be missing out on an experience that players in another campaign will be experiencing. So rather than, deciding to wrap things up in a rather I would say convenient manner, I decided to make another campaign. With the first campaign starting and inspiring everything, being known as the Martyrs of Maldaria, with the second campaign taking place in the events trying to find the martyrs known as the Stormbreakers, I decided it was time to start a third campaign that was a bit more off the wall, a bit more casual, not too much prep time involved with it, just more so throwing whatever's at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that's when the deck collectors came into effect. So the deck collectors are going to be a name that are going to pop up a little bit more early in the campaign's lifespan of the current campaign, which is why we're actually going to be doing an entire behind the screens video describing the events of the deck collectors campaign, the short-lived events that transpired unfortunately, as well as the actual characters and how things translated into the current world we're experiencing now. The deck collectors really were my creative outlet. It really felt genuine to types of ventures I would want to take, types of like characters I'd want to meet, different types of like elements of the world that I love to explore. Unfortunately for the deck collectors, their story didn't end as conveniently as a TPK. It's actually a lot worse. My creative elements that I was really inspired about and very influenced by kind of fizzled out. I was so excited and so enthusiastic about the campaign, but because of the pressure of the first two campaigns and how I wanted it to be almost like a magnum opus, I felt that Campaign 3 or deck collectors were always being pushed to the back burner, and I really felt like I wasn't doing them a service or a justice, so in the end I thought it was best just to resolve the campaign as best as I could. But fear not, the adventures and stories of the deck collectors are far from over, and I'm providing them an actual adequate conclusion in the form of this current campaign, really picking up at the events that left off previously, and really allowing the stories to wrap up in a convenient and rather professional manner. So with all three campaigns coming to an end, and personally myself wanting to come up with a fresh start within the world but kind of outside of the world, and with a following of people I didn't really expect, on a local level I would have actually people come up to me and ask how the campaign was going, to which I would reply, how do you know this? Like, word traveled so quickly, I was just kind of blown away by that fact and honestly kind of flattered. So early on in the campaign's lifespan, I believe it was as early as session 0, we did kind of reference the fact that the campaign we're currently playing in, the untitled campaign if you're seeing it now, but will later have a rather interesting group name that we've kind of hinted to for the past few sessions, is actually a sequel to the events of other campaigns prior, but not a direct sequel per se. In addition to following loose events that transpired in the campaign previously and a backlog of about almost 3 years of lore and world building, it's also a culmination of projects that I tried working on in the past but didn't really take off nearly as well, but didn't want to give up on. I wanted this really to be a love letter and a sort of like send-off for certain characters, assets, and even quest lines. There were certain things that I just had kicking around, saved in a drive in a folder that never really got the time to shine in the spotlight. It then kind of dawned on the party overall to just record this final campaign, or at least what I thought would be the final campaign. Campaign 4 as it's called, or what you guys will better know it as later down the line, the Uncommon Travelers campaign. For the most part, with the Uncommon Travelers, I thought it'd be a great way to share our stories, with everyone who had known about them, a new audience, and be a really nice way to preserve the stories and memories with my friends. It's kind of crazy to think that with a camera now in front of us and a backlog of videos and sessions and content that's going to be there forever for the most part, it holds us to a higher standard in terms of creativity, to think outside the box, to problem solve better, and to really just enjoy the experience even more because we'll be able to laugh about it later down the line. That leads us to here, me behind the screens telling one of my favorite stories with some of my favorite people in the world, and you being kind enough to take time out of your day to listen. That means more to us than you could possibly imagine, especially given how amazing the feedback's been for these past few months and how much it inspires us to continue telling these stories. Since I've been sitting here all by myself for the entirety of this video, the next session will be all about the wonderful cast that helps bring T&D to life alongside myself, and then the following one will actually be our first lore video. We'll be in depth about these mysterious deck collectors you guys keep hearing about, and what exactly they're doing now, and what was going on before. But at any rate, We'll talk about that later. I have of course been your Dungeon Master Israel, this has been Behind the Screens, and I hope your 20s are natural.